Hello and good afternoon to the Travel Talk from Travel Time. We've been absent for a few weeks because we've been taking a bit of a break over the summer, but we're back today because we've been receiving a lot of inquiries about the current protocols and what it's like to travel now. We have quite a few clients that are booked for travel from fall onwards, and they're asking a lot of questions. And we're also getting a lot of people who are just phoning us and asking questions even if they didn't book with us. So we are open to helping people with their full travel, including the recommendations of what you need for travel. So today I am joined by one of our team members who's also traveled recently. Tammy, welcome to the Travel Talk. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We have been doing a little bit of traveling of our own, you and me anyway. For different reasons, for vacation and visiting family and so on and so forth. And that is a lot of the travel that's happening this summer is what we're finding, especially people coming to Newfoundland or going to different places across Canada or the US to visit family that they have not seen for a long time. So those are joyful reunions for sure, and ones that we are happy to assist any of our clients with making the arrangements for. So you did take a recent trip to Nova Scotia to visit family. So you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, well, I was lucky enough actually to go twice. So the first time I went in June. So at that time, restrictions hadn't really been lifted here. So it was before we opened up a little. So, mask mandate was still in place and stuff. So it was, much the same as always, but we were allowed to travel within Atlantic province. So
right, the Atlantic bubble was the famous.
Yes, I was still within Atlantic bubble. So, it was pretty straightforward going in there. I just had to show proof that I did reside in Newfoundland.
Right.
when I got to the airport. And, other than that, in Nova Scotia, things were pretty back to normal, much the same as it is here right now.
So what was it like to actually go to the airport and get on a flight and take off? We haven't been doing that very much.
No, I know. I loved it, and it was exciting. Even if it was just Nova Scotia, I was happy to be back at the airport. And, at that time again, my flight going there was, I would say, half full maybe, but time I came back, things had opened up and my flight was full. So It was, it was different. Just in a matter of weeks, it had, changed a bit. So
I will monitor the comments as we go through. And I forgot to mention that if anybody is watching today and got questions about protocols or our experiences or anything at all that we can answer for you, by all means, just pop it into the chat box here and we will review. If we don't answer the questions as we go through with the information that we're going to talk about and share, then we certainly will answer any questions before we finish off. So about my experience as well, I did travel a total of 3 times throughout the pandemic for family reasons. But this summer, I did go to visit my family in New Jersey for illness reasons, which is not a great reason, but it's still travel, and it still allows you to go out and get on a plane and just experience what that has to offer. Mm-hmm. Which obviously, being in the travel industry, we're used to doing this normally quite a bit. I would say between us all, we average probably at least a trip every month or 2. Would you say?
Yes, I'd say that's correct.
Yeah. So a lot of the travel for business is not happening for us as well as for many of our clients and so on right now. But, there's still other reasons why people are traveling, and vacations are coming back. That's kind of the message that we want to provide to our listeners today, is that vacations are coming back. And there are some, hoops that you have to get through. And we'll go through some of those and what they are. And the main thing from my perspective is to be prepared. So one of the things that people are asking of us as they consider, travel and whether they will go to visit family or on vacation or whatever, is what's needed. What's needed to leave here, what's needed in the destination, what's needed to come home. So that has all changed a lot, I think we would have to say. That's changed a lot from pre-pandemic. Where you just get on a plane and go, and then you come home when you're ready. It's a lot more planning involved. So that in itself probably means that traveling right now is not for everybody. And we're certainly still seeing a mix of comfort levels. Would you say that from your client's perspective as well?
Yes, for sure. And that's kind of what I've been saying. It is definitely depending on your comfort level. Some people were on a plane as soon as it opened up, and others are still questioning if they should go. And, basically that is what it's based on, if you feel comfortable to go or not. Right.
And obviously, what we were all waiting for is those vaccinations. And thankfully, the numbers and the research has shown that, you are immensely safer after you've been vaccinated. And that gives people a comfort level too that wasn't there when we were still waiting for that to happen. Mm-hmm. One thing that I will mention, if anybody is thinking about going and hasn't booked yet, is about the flights. So when there was nobody traveling, all of our suppliers, all of our airlines, they weren't stopped flying. You could still go, and if it was essential work or medical reasons, that kind of thing. But people generally were not taking vacation trips. So the seats available and supply and demand was changed accordingly, and there were very few flights. That is not going to go from 0 to 100 just because people are now interested in going. It's going to be, again, supply and demand as people are looking and filling the flights and the seats. There will be more routes added and more options, like more dates and times and things like that. So, for example, when flights started going back to Jamaica, we normally are used to having a flight every day to Jamaica on both Air Canada and WestJet. And with the flights resuming, they were limited to 3 days a week. So depending on what day you were looking to book for your vacation, you had to be guided by that, by what days were available. So that's a key there. And obviously, as the demand is increasing, what we're seeing is that the pricing is quite high. And if anybody's looked at, the availability and the pricing, you will see what we're talking about. So just like in normal times, the further in advance that you can book, the better off you will be as far as the price and availability. So it totally makes sense to make your plans well in advance. And up to the end of August, they're still announced that they are allowing one free change should you have a reason to change your mind about traveling on that date. So there'd be no change fee involved. So that kind of takes away, that worry that people would have that, well, I want to go, but I'm not sure. So that way, having your options open, otherwise the price will be probably out of line. And I know somebody who has a flight booked for September, and they looked at it today. And if you were booking it today, it's $1,000 more per person for that one-way flight. So that's just an example of what we're seeing as far as the rates. So when you were looking at Nova Scotia, were you watching it for a while before you booked? And what did you see in regard to flights pricing?
No, I kind of wasn't, because it was a last minute, and I did end up booking last minute, and it was expensive. But one other thing to add there with the flights and not many seats available and actual flights right now. One other thing, so my second trip that I did, I went to New Brunswick. And the other thing that there's a shortage on is rental cars.
Oh, yes.
So if you do have any travel plans in the future, you might definitely want to look at that. There was no availability at Halifax Airport at all. We had to rent off-site. And, that kind of it's not convenient, right? For sure. Yeah. It's not convenient. So, I mean, we were lucky. We still got a vehicle, but, most people would like the option of, at the airport is much more convenient. And, that's standard, I think, not only in Atlantic provinces right now, that's kind of right across because, during COVID, everyone couldn't just hold on to all these vehicles when nobody were renting them. So
that's true. And that's kind of a commodity that they could sell off because there was a demand for used vehicles. So that's what a lot of the car rental companies did. And I know it's absolutely true because we just rented a car in at Newark Airport in New Jersey, and we probably paid 3 to 4 times as much as you would normally expect to pay for that vehicle. Yeah, it's pretty standard. I'll just take a quick look at the questions to see if there's anything that what we're talking about here. If somebody's expressing that they did a trip to Ontario and that they felt safe and that things were opening up. So that's good. That's good news. That's good to hear. So the flights are always a key, and people tend to watch them, for seat sales and things like that. I think we're not in that time frame where that's an option. If you're looking to go, usually I think the earlier you book is probably the best rate you're going to see at the moment, because it will be some months before things are back to a more normal schedule and normal amount of seats available, especially in and out of St. John's for sure. Mm-hmm. So one of the other things that's needed for travel, and you would not have experienced that when you went within Canada, but that's for testing, COVID testing prior to travel. So you wouldn't have needed that, and nobody would need that if you're staying within Canada. It's only if you're going outside of Canada. So that includes the US and most other Europe, Caribbean islands, wherever you're going. It would be a standard thing that we need to expect in the short term for sure. And back when I was arranging for my trip, it was surprisingly difficult to find places that actually offered testing, because some places require PCR tests, some are okay with antigen tests. But what we found at the time is that there were only PCR options available here. So that is the gold standard. And obviously the accuracy is much higher than with the quick antigen test. But if it's a place that the antigen is okay, then, it's kind of overkill to have a PCR. But that's what we ended up doing just because that was what was available. And there's a number of places locally, and we're happy to advise our clients on where to get that from our own research. And there is a cost involved. It's not complimentary testing for travel at this point here. So we'd be happy to advise on that, depending on what your destination is and what the requirements are. Because the destination requirements are all different as well. Again, nothing like that is required to travel within Canada. But to the US, for example, an antigen test is sufficient. But again, you'll need to have a PCR because there was no antigen options available. Some of the islands, a couple of the islands have recently come out with a requirement that all of their arriving guests have to be fully vaccinated. So that's something that us, the team at Travel Time, will stay on top of all those requirements and let you know that for where you're planning to travel and what's needed for that. And should things change, we always let our clients know what it is today. But obviously, what's relevant is what it is at the time of travel. So watching that and making sure that you have the links so that you can watch for any changes as well is a must. The return requirements, there are some, even if you're within Canada, so you can speak to that. What you had to do, I think it's changed a little bit probably from your first trip to now, but you can tell us about that.
Yeah, again, so I was still in the Atlantic provinces, so it wasn't as much, but as you're coming into St. John's Airport, they do require you to fill out a form that's online. It's easy, to access, but if you don't have it done, they remind you that as soon as you come down the escalator at the airport, there's a sign showing you how to do it or whatnot. And at that time when I traveled, they didn't require proof of vaccination or anything like that. But, depending on where you're coming from now,
yes,
you do need it.
Yes. So when I was returning to Canada, I needed a PCR test to return to Canada within 72 hours. And it depends on where you're getting that. If you need it within a certain short time frame like that, the places we found, there was a charge for it, but there are some places where you can get that complimentary in places in the US, for example. And most of our clients that have been traveling are actually going to Sandals resorts, which is the gold standard for watching out for all protocols and making sure that everything is met as far as the protocols of cleanliness, COVID protocols, and making sure that everything is as it should be. And they are also providing the COVID test for return home complimentary. So done right at the resort. You don't have to go anywhere. They have a room set up as a little medical clinic where you make an appointment and your COVID test is done right there in time for your return home. So again, it depends on where you're leaving from, but to arrive in Canada, a negative PCR test is mandatory. And you have to fill out the ArriveCan app. So that's an app on Android and Apple that you download to your phone, and you fill in all of the information relevant of where you're coming from and where you're going. And in case you're not approved for no quarantine, they do want your address of where you would be staying and where you could possibly do quarantine if you needed to do so. So that is the Canada requirement. And right now, as of the 9th of August, Canada is welcoming fully vaccinated Americans that can arrive here and not have to quarantine. And as of a date in September, I think it's early September. You don't recall that date, do you?
I feel like it's the 5th, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, it's early September. International fully vaccinated travelers will be welcomed into Canada as well. So that will kind of change the landscape of who the people are who are arriving in Canada, I guess. And as you mentioned, the Newfoundland form, which is also an online form that you can fill in on your phone, it is required for everybody arriving to Newfoundland. I don't think all provinces have something similar, but that's what we have in Newfoundland. And in order not to have to quarantine in Newfoundland, you have to upload a copy of your fully vaccinated schedule. Your official record just gets uploaded, a picture of it, saved on your phone, uploaded into the app, and that guarantees that you would not have to quarantine on arrival. And for Americans that are coming into Canada, it is a random selection, but some people will be asked to do a take-home test for COVID. So there's no way to know in advance if you'll be one of those. But we were given a test when we went through Montreal that we just took home and did on video with a nurse the next day. Full directions are in the box that comes with. So it's a pretty simple process. And I guess the main takeaway is that all of these hoops have to be met in order to be able to travel freely and not have to adhere to quarantines and so on. So once we book somebody to a vacation or to a destination outside of Canada, we make sure that they have the links to all of the information. The tourist boards for each of the islands have the details of what is required to enter. And then, of course, the Government of Canada website has everything that is required to return to Canada and to Newfoundland if that's where you're coming. So we make sure that that is all relevant information and you have it on hand. And, obviously, if things change, then, alerting you of those changes is also part of what we do. Another question, do they seat you side by side with others outside who you are traveling with? I guess that means on the plane. And yes, most of the airlines are fully, they're not reserving seats as such. But generally speaking, now, we have a great vaccination rate in Canada. So I think most of the people traveling are vaccinated, or a good percentage of them are, if the overall vaccination rates are a good indication. So that is protection in itself. And obviously masks are still required in the airports and on board the planes. And that I don't think will change anytime soon. No. And it does give you an extra layer of protection as well as your own vaccination that would take care of, any issues, I guess. Somebody else asked, what happens if the test comes back positive? And I guess that means when you're in destination. And again, that depends where you are. If you're in the US, for example, and you have a positive test, you will not be admitted boarding to your flight with a positive test. You have to show a negative test to board your flight. So you're staying where you are for the quarantine period or until you have a negative test, because that's what's required to board any commercial flight home to Canada. If you are in a destination, say, for example, Sandals, which is what we're familiar with, Sandals is including an insurance which covers, should you happen to test positive or become ill with COVID, it covers the medical costs that would be associated with that. And it also covers up to 14 days of quarantine. So if you were to test positive before you return home, you're staying another few days at Sandals in a room with room service for your meals, three meals a day, with access outside just to your balcony. So that hasn't happened a whole lot, but they have had a few instances of that. And they've been able to take care of that quite well. And it's an inconvenience, but, it is part of the risk of going anywhere or even at home should you inadvertently test positive. But definitely a bonus of booking with Sandals for sure. Not every resort is offering that. That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because from our comfort levels with people taking vacations, I guess my background as a nurse as well, I realize the importance of, the health and safety of travelers as well. Vaccinations are a very key part of that, which we totally recommend. And, at Sandals Resorts, knowing that they have all of these protocols figured out, they have this included insurance that covers, so that you're not out of pocket for the additional nights. I have seen some reports of people at different destinations where that's not a policy, not our clients, thankfully. But then if you test positive, you can't come back on your flight. You got the extra cost of however many nights in a hotel that you weren't planning on for your vacation. So that's not a position we want to be in with that call from a client. And that's not a position that you want to be in. So right now, choosing wisely, I guess, according to our recommendations of where you're going to go on vacation, so that all of those possibilities are taken care of in the very best way possible. What happens if the resort is sold out? Where do you stay? Well, they're not selling every room at a hotel, at any hotel these days. They're not permitted to. And so there is a quarantine room section available. So they would not be left in that position. So all of those details are considered and figured out in advance so that there is no possibility of them being out of space and that type of thing. That's not a thing. And I think if there's no more questions on there, is there any other things that we may have missed, Tammy, that you've thought of?
The only other thing that I was going to mention is if, regards to vaccines and stuff, I do have an app downloaded, that you can upload your vaccination, proof of vaccination on there. So it's all in one spot. I just find that a little convenient, and that way you know where it is. So it's another option. There's several apps, I think, that you can get depending on what type of phone you have.
The other thing that I totally recommend is, yes, it's great to have a copy saved on your phone and uploaded to wherever it needs to upload, but always consider traveling with a print copy of whatever requirements are needed. And that's one of the things about going to any of the destinations that require a travel authorization, or, if they require a proof of vaccination record, besides having it on your phone and being able to show it. Like, what happens if, your phone automatically is out of battery when you get there and you can't open it up? Like, you don't want to be just kind of fumbling and in a position like that. So have a print copy of all of that with you. Just print a copy of it, keep it with you in your backpack or your purse or whatever, so that you're never stuck. You have the requirements in hand, and that's a best practice going forward, I think, right now, where those kinds of documents are required, and we're not normally used to having to provide that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is all I have today. I do think that the travel is still worth it. If you were to ask me, is it too much hassle? Should I just not bother to travel this year? I would say that that's not the case. I have several more trips booked for this year myself, even though, that COVID test and then the return home COVID test, it's still worth it, in my opinion. So it just depends on what your motivation is for traveling. For some people, if travel, is something that you can put on the back burner for a year or 2 years or whatever it's been, and plan for next year. We certainly have lots of clients, and that's their comfort level, and that's okay. Everybody will be ready at different times. But if traveling is your thing, like it is for us at Travel Time, definitely it's worth it. And, we can help you facilitate what is needed. Obviously, traveling on the heels of a pandemic is not without risk entirely, but those risks are calculated risk. And with your vaccinations and knowing the requirements in the different locations and what is provided and supplied to you, should you have that deviation of, finding yourself with a positive test for coming home, and how you deal with that, knowing all of that up front is what we're here to help you with. So with that being said, travel is still a thing. It's still alive and well. Lots of people are very, very anxious to get back on a plane if you haven't done so already. And we're here to help you.
Yeah, and don't wait too long, because people are thinking, oh, nobody's traveling, and I'll just book, last minute. Well, that's not a good idea, because what we're seeing is most resorts right now, actually, especially for next year, don't have much availability. So
that's a good point as well. Like, because so many reservations were moved from in 2020 to 2021. And now some people we're moving some again into 2022. So, there is a backlog of people that really need to take those vacations that they haven't gotten to do. So there is going to be, low availability for the next year or two for sure, because of just the number of people who've moved vacations but still want to take them. So the early bird gets the worm. The early birds with a plan in place are going to get the better rates and the better availability going forward, for sure.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully this was informative. Feel free to reach out and leave us a message or ask any other questions that you may have. And certainly any member of the team at Travel Time is ready and willing and able to assist you with any of your travel plans going forward. Thanks again. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.